Once again, I extend a hearty welcome to everybody who's joined us for this session. My name is Alicia, and I'm a part of the Connecting Dreams Foundation team. We have organized the Changemaker 20 Summit under the aegis of G20 and its tracks C20 and Y20. Um, so I welcome everybody once again to the Changemaker 20 Summit. Today, we've all gathered here not to merely mark an occasion, but to unite for a higher purpose. The summit aims to forge connections beyond boundaries, celebrating the potency of collaboration. It's about charting new territories, confronting global challenges, and uniting under the banner of a positive change. Today, we have all gathered here for the interesting expert led session by Mubashira Zaidi. And the topic of the session is Adolescent Aspirations and the Everyday Negotiations. I would like to introduce Mubashira. So, Mubashira, first of all, I would like to mention that Mubashira works with ISST, which is the Institute of Social Studies Trust. We have already had a session with the director of ISST yesterday, and ISST has been extremely proactive in partnering with Connecting Dreams Foundation for the summit. And Mubashira has been working in the development sector for over 15 years, initially with women survivors of violence in the slum settlements of Dharavi, Mumbai, through counseling, legal aid, and building community support structures in forms of crisis intervention groups to reduce and prevent violence against women and girls. Subsequently, she was also involved in developing campaigns related to justice and accountability matters, particularly the ICC India campaign against mass violence in India. For the last 10 years, she's been working in ISST and has had opportunities in both program and research related roles. At ISST, she has contributed to the development of programs, research, and analysis in women's economic empowerment, women's work, the care economy, and women's movements and claims making processes in India. She's also pursuing her PhD at the Humboldt University, Berlin. Welcome, Mubashira. We are very excited to have you over here. And personally, being a student of gender studies, I'm very excited to hear you speak about this topic. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much to you, Alicia, for contacting us and actually making this happen. And thank you to Changemakers 20 Summit for this opportunity, to ISST and to me personally to present the research. I would like to share my screen. It is we're trying to understand the concept of aspirations in a low-income, disadvantaged urban setting in Delhi. From the view of everyday negotiations and agencies of girls and boys using a gendered lens. But we're also trying to understand it given the SDG goal 5. Just to introduce the topic to you, the SDG 5 talks about discrimination against women and girls and how it is a basic human right to be treated, equally. But it's also crucial for a sustainable future, for, say, better human development indicators, for better GDP, for, economic growth and development. But why aspirations? Why are we looking at aspirations? And one important reason is that aspirations has a future orientation for possible, positive possibilities of being. And in terms of reaching SDG Goal 5, aspirations talks of desire, talks of ambition, as well as denotes a yearning to reach a better state in future. So it has implications for breaking poverty cycle. It is, it can promote more inclusive and sustainable future possibilities. So in this study, I'm using the definition of aspiration as possible selves by Marcus and Nurius, who introduced the concept in 1986, but it is quite relevant to our study today as well. So while they say that creation of possible selves reveals the inventive nature of persons, but very importantly, they say that possible selves or aspirations are bounded with particular social experiences or systems of idea. The second important aspect of aspiration for this study is that they are formed in interaction with the given cultural norms, which are in turn, of course, historically determined through social structures. Social determinacy, in fact, has been an important point of discussion in studies concerning aspirations. Aspirations is not only seen as as something that can overcome poverty, but also is something that can contribute to poverty persistence. So, if you engage with this literature, you may know Appadurai, who had done an ethnographic study and spoke of capacity to aspire. And he talks of how aspirations to the good life tend to quickly degenerate or dissolve into densely local ideas about marriage, work, leisure, health, and which in turn results into low capacity to aspire among the poor, while the same is more fully developed among the rich. So, in this study, we really also want to understand these propositions, where on one hand we see a potential in aspirations to overcome poverty, and on the other, there are socially determined aspirations, and which can in fact result in persistence of poverty. So basically, we're trying to understand the operationalization in its, in its daily manner, its formation, and what are the different potential directions it can take in younger adults. So, what the immediate motivation for this research was that ISST has both research and a community action program, and based on our research, we wanted to develop a program, a project for adolescents and young adults focusing on their aspirations and trying to understand how we can create an enabling environment which will help their aspirations to break the poverty cycle or be gender transformative. Also, in case of ISST, we focused a lot on women, working women's conditions of work, and now we wanted to understand what happens to women before entering the workforce. So this was the idea, and some questions that we came up with is, how do different socio-cultural economic factors influence aspirations? How do young adults or children, interact with these social, cultural, economic factors, and when they're influencing their aspirations? What are the implications for future policy and practice? And this was a mixed methodology research. We had a survey in an urban slum called Kalyanpuri. We also had participatory games and exercises, FGDs with parents and children, and different community members there. So, just to give you a background to who these study participants were, one is that children were mainly in the age group of 13 and 17 years, and but also just to mention that for those under the age of 18, we took consent from the parents, when we were conducting the survey, and confidentiality was maintained and all of that. And since ISST is a center which has been running since last 20 years, there is a level of trust in the community. The socioeconomic conditions can be observed from parent occupations, where you can see that fathers were into petty trade, street vending, or worked as daily wagers. Mothers were either into no paid work, but this can be disputed because sometimes mothers do not share their paid work, or they can think that they're not into paid work when they're actually into home-based work. But many women also said they were in domestic work, they were home-based workers, and were factory workers. And almost 90% of the children went to government schools. Like in India, people from low-income backgrounds who cannot afford private schools go to government schools, which are sometimes, poorer in infrastructure and quality of education. So, for this study, one set of inquiries was around who are the influential actors in the lives of adolescents and young adults, who are their source of motivation. And we see that apart from parents and siblings, especially elder ones, teachers played a key role in their lives. And one can also see that there were a higher number of girls who were self-motivated, than the boys, and teachers also played a stronger role in case of girls. Lines of communication, the image that you see on the right, was an exercise um, which made clear what kind of boundaries are drawn around what can be spoken to whom, how much can be disclosed to a parent or not. Otherwise, it will invite unnecessary curiosity. And even here, you will see that the communication lines appear quite gendered. So you can take a moment to see the kind of quotes that are coming, where father, when you speak to father, you talk about studies and news, and when you're talking to mother, it's about household chores. The girl is saying, I would like to disclose only some amount of what is happening, because I do not want to invite too many inquiries from my father. And also how gendered understanding is, like boys do not want to become too close to their sisters because they're going to finally leave the family. So these are the kind of things and influences that the adolescents are dealing with. In terms of actors, institutions, and experiences, we also try to understand different critical decisions of their lives. And in terms of career, of course, in both cases, boys and girls, a higher number said that they themselves decide. But when it comes to selecting partners, there are many more actors, if you see, in the lives of girls than boys. In the FGD, where you see the image that is drawn on the right side, uh, the children first, the exercise was that first they chose 4 5 critical life decisions, where and then later they decided what are the who has the most decision making power. So this is an image made by a girls group, and we see elder brothers playing a key role in all the decisions, and we also observe padosi or the neighbors playing a role in selecting marriage partners for girls. You will also notice that girls have not written hum or we in the petal or bubble concerning sexual relations, and they're only partly playing a role in education and marriage. And if you see the quote below, and this is just one of the many instances that were shared by the girls, is on the question of marriage, and it came across as the decision, that often confronted the girls more than the boys. There was a lot of anticipation, anxiety around this question. Similarly, when we spoke to the parent or the elders in the community, they had a similar concern for girls, but for entirely different other reasons. While for girls, early marriage was really a huge issue for these girls, where usually after 12th, girls were expected to get married. And we're talking about a Delhi urban slum area. And so for girls, it meant that early marriage could end their aspiration. But for parents, when you spoke to parents, you realized for parents, aspiration for girls often ended at marriage. That their aspiration was that we get our girls married. And this was an ongoing negotiation between girls and the family and the wider community on controlling their sexuality and selecting partners. A lot of challenges that were raised by children, young adults, and parents alike was on the issue of safety and security for not only girls but also boys. The children spoke of an environment, that was violent, addiction in home and community was common place, and in terms of opportunities being curtailed because the safety and security concerns were much deeper. Kalyanpuri is an area which is known for petty crimes and conflicts and even communal violence recently. There were huge concerns around sexual violence, particularly in case of girls. Also, these fears were often magnified and reinforced. The idea that girls need to be protected and controlled, even it was at the cost of higher education. So, for instance, since colleges were at a distance or were co-ed colleges or co-education colleges, girls usually had to drop out because traveling that far or being, studying where boys were also present in class was not acceptable for the community for safety reasons. So, but girls who were ambitious enough would, take up distance learning, but which meant that there was that was limiting their exposure or social capital, which is extremely important to increase capacities or excelling in careers. So, in terms of what were the parents saying, these are the quotes from parents' discussions that reflect their deep dilemmas. They want their children to excel, including girls, but are caught up with actual issues and real constraints. And these fear perceptions emanating from real issues, issues reached a peak when it concerned girls, and is mixed with normative ideas about honor, about shame, whether it is dignified for a woman to work, and that the in-laws can decide what they want to do with the girl. So, if you remember Upper the Rise finding that often aspirations dissolve into these daily things of safety, security, and health, and all of that. So this was reflected in the dilemmas here. It also points towards socioeconomic circumstances of poverty, where existence is often undignified and insecure. And talk of honor and respect does take precedence, and at least it reflected here. And in a patriarchal setup, all this honor and respect you centered around what roles, what are the good roles for women and girls. So while we see mothers and fathers, they do have high aspirations for their children, especially since they do not want their children to end up into similar circumstances, similar living conditions. But they're also, faced with these very real dilemmas. This was another group exercise that we did with girls and we asked them to trace their future expected journeys to reach their goal, and we did some six such discussions in the community. And the girls traced, expected bottlenecks and opportunities on their way to reach the aspiration. Here, education is seen as the main opportunity, while challenges included, of course, the pressure to marry early, but also to access finance, technology, information. All of these, gender divide when we talk about it, is also in the digital space. So while the strategies noted by them were improving their confidence level, they wanted to increase their agency and capacities to engage with the society. One aspect was how we can improve our English ability skills, because that was not only associated with a person's social status, but also in terms of being able to negotiate and talk with people in the wider society. Also gaining support or understanding from families. Here, women, girls also talked about in-laws, finding in-laws who are supportive of their journeys. Uh, After all these negotiations, so we were talking about the circumstances and the negotiations that adolescents and young adults get into. But after all these negotiations that they constantly engage in, their aspirations are somewhat like this that you see on the screen right now. But most of the girls want to be teachers, that too in the government sector. But why in the government sector? Because the job is secure. There are maternity benefits. There are retirement benefits. Here you can reflect on the unpaid care or the gender roles of women and girls, and girls want to accommodate those. Girls were also very highly interested in fashion and beauty industry. On the other hand, boys were mostly interested in running their own businesses, in being police officers. But of course, there were also women. Girls in our sample who wanted to become police officers. Also, because the Sati Center, a community action program, is within the premises of a police station. I think the influence of the environment was such that they also wanted to become police officers. So you can see how, despite all the negotiations that were happening, the aspirations that even what the girls and boys were saying were quite gendered. and were socially determined. However, one can see that these aspirations fall mostly as a higher difficulty level. And not the ones that they think are easily achievable. So even if these are gendered, they were difficult to achieve. And girls are, and here is an opportunity that you can see that the girls are choosing more difficult paths. And if you remember, they're also more self motivated. Um, there was another interesting exercise that we did where both girls and boys were writing their aspirations, which were similar to the ones we saw in the previous graph. But after doing that, they were told to write down the vocations that young people in their neighborhood, their extended family, their community people are doing. And it was kind of shocking to them, for us too, because it was an eye opener, a reality check. Because where most of the occupations are listed now were not in their aspiration list. So their own family members or their own community were not, not part of the same kind of workforce that they imagine themselves to be. So we discussed what went wrong here. These are the people who had similar aspirations a few years back, and they're not, because they're still vegetable vendors, they're butchers, they're mechanics, similar things, traditional work that their families perform. Again, they highlighted the different social issues and the poverty circumstances that they live in. Um, This is also to briefly highlight when we say that aspirations are meant for a better future state of being. For the study respondents, these possible selves included income. I mean, what are these better, possible ways of being? And this was basically reflected in better incomes, in status, in being independent for young girls, but also a fulfillment for oneself and for the family. So while they're negotiating completely with the family, they also want independence on the family, but they also want to make their family proud. There was also demand for addiction-free, violence-free, so this violence-free environment. So these were the kind of aspirations that they were expressing. Um, Here, wanted to, in a way, start concluding what I'm trying to say is that um, gender differences are quite stark, are quite real, and aspirations were indeed socially determined. They were socially determined, and negotiations were happening within those socially determined aspirations. Um, but we can see immense opportunities, especially in case of girls who are self-motivated, ready to take up the challenge. Parents also want better circumstances for their children. Some studies pointing out that poverty results in low aspiration is something we still want to disagree with, because these opportunities are real. Although the expected journeys and trajectories are highly gendered, with problems of early marriage and discontinuation of education taking predominance in case of girls, and substance abuse and involvement in violence and delinquency higher among girls, but both groups were quite constrained in their aspirations and caught up with these constant anxious negotiations. So both kind of traps were at work here. External constraints such as quality of education or poor, low enforcement to control violence, easy availability of alcohol, drugs, but also behavioral traps that became consequential because of these external constraints, external environments. The gendered norms were reinforced, for example, and often also became an independent issue. So in terms of action points, especially given these traps, where there's, we can feel that there is a high probability of aspiration failure. But given the research findings, these are the 3 or 4 implications for policy and practice in relation to youth development, and if you want to promote SDG Goal 5. So, with respect to internal constraints emanating from gender norms and which are heightened due to poverty cultures, We've realized even in our project, in our program, that increasing the capacities of adolescents and youth to critically understand and analyze their situations and make informed choices by expanding their horizons and your or available options is critical. And this can be done through greater exposure, information, quality education, and training, as well as improving their capacity to negotiate gender norms within their families and communities. But this will also require needs assessments and the designing of educational and training programs that address these needs using participatory pedagogies. Further, to increase participation of girls, a focus is needed on recognizing, on reducing, redistributing the 3 R's, of unpaid care work, and questioning unhealthy masculinities and social and peer pressure on boys. Sometimes in our programs, we focus a lot on girls because, of course, they're more disadvantaged. And at the cost of focusing on boys. And we've realized in our project that we need to take both of them together. Similarly, in the context of poverty, poor infrastructure and poor infrastructure actually narrow young people's options, identify and reducing these external constraints, but not just by making available better facilities for education and skilling and training. We often do that. We say, okay, here is a facility and the education is available, but what we have realized in our research is that we need to increase the access to these available opportunities or facilities by taking on safety and security issues on a priority. And especially now in a world of uncertainty, limited resources in these circumstances, evidence is vital. And evidence-based framework, which also the SDGs talk about, which takes account not only gender disaggregated data, but going beyond and looking at intersectionalities, looking at caste and age and religion and other all kinds of demographics to understand who is being discriminated and how and what are these access issues. Um, Here is a movie, which I could share with Alicia later, and maybe this can be seen at your own leisure later. So I'm stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you very much, Mubashira. This was I don't know, I don't have a proper adjective for it, but this was really eye-opening, like you've mentioned. I have a particular question that when you were mentioning the action points, I had a question in my mind. So, because you have had the first-hand opportunity to sort of speak with adolescents in these communities, and also you've mentioned that the access to opportunities is what is very gendered as well. Like, uh, probably just a basic example of stepping out at night, that access, that very simple access, it's very different for girls and boys. So I just want to understand, because I have also had the opportunity to actually engage with this age group of people in my previous work experiences. I have noticed that the fixation of the idea of equality is very much there in young boys more than girls. And young boys generally, what I've seen, have generally feel that the opportunities are very equal only. Why do you keep saying that girls are disadvantaged? The opportunities provided by governments, by everybody, is pretty much equal. So in your conversation with people from these communities, especially with the young adults and adolescents, how well does the idea of equality sit with them? Do they really believe that girls and boys are equal in access to the things that you've mentioned, or do the boys also sort of believe that no, they are a little more advantaged, in a more advantageous position than the girls?
Yeah. This has been quite a challenge actually for us because we work with both girls and boys. Initially, like I'm saying, this was an action research program where we have already a center dealing with working with both boys and girls. But this project we started only with girls. The boys came up to us and said, "Hello, we're also from the same houses. We're from the same community, same poverty levels, same parents, why do you think they are they because you were doing a lot of interesting activities with them, and they felt that they were we are sidelining them or discriminating against them. They said that our situations are equal and you're treating them more favorably than us. So then we realized that that was a mistake, and we need to have a more nuanced discussion on equality, and we included the boys significantly in our program, because even the girls were saying that we are doing all these fantastic gender sensitive discussions, but I mean, it's all right here in a closed room with all the girls, but when I go back, I have to deal with my brothers, with my peers who are boys, my parents, and you know, engage with them also. We want these concepts to reach them. So I think boys are open to understanding, and a nuanced discussion of, for instance, early marriages is something that do not impact them. Or street lights, not having street lights is still okay with boys, but girls can be very disadvantaged. Or the fact that boys often are sent to private schools because the resources are limited with parents, and the girls are sent to government schools. So all these things, when we these exercises that we did with them, we also did with in mixed groups, or separately with boys as well. And the nuanced understanding of what is substantive equality and not formative equality, so there was a level of understanding. And now, after 3-4 years of this project, there are boys who have become a support system for girls, because they understand, many of them, they do understand what it is to be, what are the gender norms and how is it different, how does it impact differently. There are also, now we're very happy that discussions on caste are coming in, discussions on religion are coming in, and how different people within the gender norms are impacted. So it is a very gradual process, but we are seeing that it is happening and people are taking on. But we started off exactly at what you're saying, that that we are equal, and why are girls being treated like this and not us.
Right, really, really interesting. And intersectionality, like you mentioned, the conversations regarding caste are also very important. So, since you've not mentioned that, I mean, I think this study does not include the lens of caste, but I mean, this is a general question that I have, that again, young adults and adolescents' understanding of a community space, and how sort of, because another question actually in this question only, because I think the news is pretty open for everyone, and everybody knows that they, on a very regular daily basis, the kind of atrocities that keep happening in our country. And I am assuming that the communities, adolescents and young adults in the communities are also aware about it. But how is their understanding of a community space, and the understanding of religion slash caste atrocities in community spaces, and what are their opinions about this? Have you had the opportunity to have any conversation with them regarding this, and if so, how do they understand this? Because they are going to gradually grow up, and I think a lot of them are already on the a lot of people from the communities are already on the receiving end of it. So, how do they understand violence in communities with respect to caste and religion? Do they have an understanding of that?
Yeah, that's a very challenging and a difficult space. Somehow, talking of gender norms is still easy, and we've realized that in a community space, especially those communities, low income communities that are really impacted with such atrocities, with such discriminations, it's a very extremely difficult and a sensitive topic. I'll give you an instance where our we call it Yuva Sati Center, a youth center. We created a different space, and we wanted to have a rented space. This space that we were finding was in a Valmiki community, which is a lower caste area. A lot of our youth, um citing problems of safety security, often low caste groups or certain religions are associated, their community, their spaces or their localities are not safe. And because of this reason, we will not come to the center anymore, because this area is part of that community, and we will not get, even if we do get entry, we will not be safe. So these are the kind of things that come up, and there are discussions that we hold. Sometimes people get angry, people do not understand, but our position in our team is very clear, that we are with the marginalized, whether it is the girls in under gender norms, or when it comes to intersectionalities. And especially when certain, like you talked about news, and more we hear of these, we take up these news items and start discussing. Also, we realized that a lot of our, when we started off, a lot of our children were school going children and belong to a certain class, still within the poverty circumstance, belong to a certain class and a caste. But those children who were, who dropped out from school, were even lower in class and caste and religion. So bringing them to the community and actually involving and engaging our present youth, using theater and other non-threatening means, community radio, having them with us in engaging this other youth in their neighborhood and bringing them to our center has also helped. Um, Again, not many have been able to come out with the COVID crisis. We had a number of children who were coming in, who were from different communities, and and all different communities were getting to interact in different activities that we were doing. But with COVID crisis, again, we saw that a lot of families who migrated back, or who lost their jobs, or girls who got married earlier, were from these lower castes, were from these even lower income groups, and we lost them. It's a mobile group. We lost those children. So a kind of discomfort that was there within the core group of youth and us, of how we need to bring back those communities to our center. So it's a very sensitive topic. I think we've still not been able to reach the religion aspect, because it is so political. It is, and it is a daily conversation that probably happens in families, and especially with elections and around the corner. It is an extremely sensitive topic, and we try to approach it as much as possible. But we realize that, if you look at in terms of intensity, communal issues are even more sensitive. Then we can talk about caste, and then like gender norms. So, like, in increasing intensity. I mean, the political scenario is such, but we just deal with the situation as much as possible.
Thank you so much. This really, I mean, I've heard a lot of people saying that the caste divide does not exist in urban spaces. So that also comes from a point of privilege only, and being casteless again is also, of course, a privilege. So the what you said, young minds also start learning those caste divides from their families, and this very well actually, because I have lived in urban spaces only, I've seen this happen. And what you said again also sheds more light on that claim, that claim is absolutely not true. Urban spaces definitely have that caste divide, and it also plays a huge role in understanding of caste.
Also, I would just like to add, often these discriminations do not happen in terms of this caste or that religion. It is stereotypes.
Right.
No one would say that I will not go to that community because it is Valmiki or Muslim, or a certain community, but they will say, it's unsafe, it is dirty, it is, so those kind of things come
Hmm.
up, and then that where it is coming from, but they're not. So it's the discussion is also, I mean, it's like ingrained inside us in terms of how we see. So, and sometimes we feel we're not talking about caste here, we're talking about those conditions that are prevailing. So yeah, so the way it is covered, it was quite enlightening to me when we engage with communities, with ourselves and others in the community.
Would you like to make any recommendations to the attendees, any sort of literature that they should read up, or any sort of more nuanced but easy to grasp um, movies? Or, I mean, we've obviously shared ISST's short films and movie documentaries with our audience, but apart from that, for young change makers who are just going to that path of change making and also trying to get a more gender equitable world, and who are constantly trying to do something about it, is there anything that you would recommend to them?
Well, ISST produces a lot of research studies, but sometimes those could be difficult to read for young, you know, like young people. It can be very research
Yeah, kind
oriented.
of.
But movies, definitely, movies and policy briefs that give you crisp ideas, I think that is something that we are churning out, trying to do more and more, because that is where people actually read, and those who are academically oriented will read our reports, but movies. And so the movie that I will share with you now, if you're more academically oriented, then of course Upper Durai is one you can talk about. Then there is, if you're talking about gender norms, then Diane Elson around care work, there is a lot of literature. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at simpler stuff, then it would be policy briefs and movies that we have. And in the chat, possibly I don't know if I can share the link to the video, and you can, yeah, probably share it with the participants later, or participants can have
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Great. Then that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you very much, Mubashira, for presenting your work. We are very grateful to have you here. And we have a couple more sessions with ISST on the 20th for the audience over here. And ISST again, once again, has been very proactive and prompt with their participation at the Changemaker 20 Summit, and I'm extremely grateful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the appreciation. It was lovely coming here.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thank you,
Bye
everyone. Bye
bye.
bye.